Isabella Ferretti adjusted her glasses nervously, tucking a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she studied the auction catalog in her trembling hands. The magnificent glass dome of the Galleria Umberto I soared above her, its neoclassical architecture all marble columns and iron latticework, creating an atmosphere of old-world elegance that both thrilled and intimidated her. The evening air was cool and crisp, and the soft glow of chandeliers illuminated the faces of Naples' elite as they mingled in designer gowns and perfectly tailored suits. She shouldn't be here. The ticket alone had cost her 2 weeks of grocery money, but when the National Archaeological Museum had mentioned that a private collector might donate a damaged Renaissance fresco for restoration, Isabella knew she had to attend. This could be her chance to finally prove herself worthy of her own restoration studio, to step out from behind the museum's shadow and make a name for herself in Naples's competitive art world. Around her, the city's elite mingled in designer gowns and perfectly tailored suits, their laughter echoing off the polished floors. Isabella smoothed down her floral dress, the nicest thing she owned, purchased second-hand from a vintage shop in Quartieri Spagnoli, and tried not to feel like an imposter among these people who belonged to a world she could only glimpse from the outside. "Lot 47, the auctioneer's voice rang out, cultured and precise. "A damaged fresco panel attributed to the school of Giotto, 14th century, recovered from a private chapel in Sorrento." Isabella's heart raced. This was it. She raised her paddle with a confidence she didn't feel, her voice barely audible as she called out her bid. 3,000 euros. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone behind her countered immediately. 5,000. Isabella's stomach dropped. She'd stretched her savings to the absolute limit. 6,000, she managed, her voice cracking slightly. The bidding continued, each counteroffer like a blow to her dreams. At 12,000 euros, she knew she was done. Tears of frustration pricked at her eyes as she lowered her paddle, defeated before she'd even begun. That's when she noticed him. He stood near the back of the gallery, surrounded by men in dark suits who created an invisible barrier around him despite the crowd. Dante Moretti was exactly as the whispered rumors described, tall, imposing, with jet-black hair slicked back from a face that could have been carved from marble itself. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Isabella's entire year's rent, and his dark eyes surveyed the auction with the detached interest of someone for whom money was merely a tool, not a limitation. Everyone knew who Dante Moretti was. You didn't grow up in Naples without learning which names to speak carefully, which men to avoid meeting on dark streets. The Moretti family had controlled the Camora's port operations for 3 generations, and Dante had transformed the business into something even more dangerous, organized, calculated, corporate in its efficiency. Isabella had never seen him in person before. She'd expected someone crueler-looking, more obviously threatening. Instead, what struck her was his absolute stillness, like a predator conserving energy. Even his breathing seemed measured, controlled. There was something almost tragic in the loneliness that surrounded him, despite being encircled by his men. The auctioneer was closing the bidding on the fresco. Isabella made a desperate decision. She would approach the winner, plead her case, offer to do the restoration work for a reduced fee. It was unprofessional, probably useless, but she had to try. She moved through the crowd as the hammer fell, her focus entirely on reaching the elderly gentleman who'd won the bid. She didn't notice Dante Moretti had shifted position, didn't see that he'd moved directly into her path, his attention momentarily caught by something Marco Santini was whispering urgently in his ear. Isabella's hand, reaching out to steady herself as she squeezed between 2 groups of guests, landed on something warm and solid. Skin. A hand. His hand. Time seemed to fracture. Isabella looked down at where her palm rested on the back of Dante Moretti's hand. Her fingers pale and paint-stained against his olive skin, her ridiculous floral dress a riot of color against his severe charcoal sleeve. She felt his pulse beneath her fingertips, steady and strong, and the warmth of his skin sent a shock through her entire body. The gallery went silent. Not the natural quiet of a pause in conversation, but the terrible, suffocating silence of collective held breath. Every eye in the room fixed on the point of contact between Isabella's hand and the most feared man in Naples. She should move. She should apologize. She should do anything except stand here, frozen, with her hand still touching his. But when she finally managed to lift her gaze from their joined hands to his face, what she saw made her forget how to breathe entirely. Dante Moretti was staring at their hands with an expression of such naked shock, such profound confusion, that he looked almost vulnerable. His dark eyes, which moments before had been carefully empty, now held something raw and unguarded. Not anger. She'd braced for fury, for violence, for the legendary Moretti temper everyone whispered about. Instead, his expression was one of wonder, almost reverence, as if she'd done something impossible. His lips parted slightly, and Isabella could see his chest rise with a sharp intake of breath. The faint scar through his eyebrow caught the gallery's golden light as his brow furrowed, not in rage, but in what looked disturbingly like longing. Isabella's voice came out as barely a whisper. She snatched her hand back as if burned, clutching it against her chest. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I wasn't looking where I was going. I'm sorry." The spell broke. Marco Santini stepped forward immediately, his face set in hard lines, his hand moving toward the inside of his jacket in an unmistakable gesture. But Dante raised his other hand, the one Isabella hadn't touched, in a small, decisive motion that froze his consigliere mid-movement. "It's nothing," Dante said, his voice low and rough, as if he hadn't spoken in hours. His accent was pure Neapolitan, but refined, educated. An accident. He was still looking at her. His dark eyes traced her face with an intensity that made Isabella feel stripped bare, as if he could see past her cheap dress and clumsy apology to something deeper, something true. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but not the anger she'd expected either. "Forgive me," Isabella managed, backing away. Her face burned with humiliation. Everyone was still staring. She could hear the whispers starting, rippling through the crowd like wind through grass. "Excuse me." She turned and fled, pushing through the crowd toward the exit, her vision blurring with tears. Behind her, she heard Marco's urgent voice. "Boss, that was—" "I know what it was," Dante interrupted quietly. "Find out who she is." Isabella burst through the gallery's doors into the cool October evening. The rain had intensified, droplets catching the streetlights and turning the cobblestones of Via San Carlo into rivers of gold. She didn't stop running until she reached the narrow streets of Quartieri Spagnoli, where laundry hung between buildings like festival flags, and the smell of pizza from a dozen family-owned restaurants filled the air. Home. Safety. Anonymity. She climbed the worn stairs of Palazzo Carafa, her shoes echoing in the ancient stairwell, and let herself into her third-floor studio. The familiar smell of linseed oil and turpentine greeted her like an old friend. Half-restored paintings leaned against every wall, and her workbench was cluttered with brushes, solvents, and reference books. The skylight above revealed the storm in full force now, rain drumming against the glass. Isabella sank onto her paint-splattered stool and buried her face in her hands. What had she done? She'd touched Dante Moretti in front of half of Naples' elite. She'd seen something in his eyes that she wasn't supposed to see, something private and profound that no one was meant to witness. And worst of all, a small, treacherous part of her wanted to see it again. 3 days passed before the notice appeared. Isabella found it taped to the palazzo's main door when she returned from her morning shift at the Basilica of San Lorenzo Maggiore, where she'd been restoring medieval frescoes. The paper was official, stamped, terrifyingly legal. It informed all residents that the building had been sold to Esposito Development Corporation and would be demolished in 60 days to make way for luxury apartments. Her hands shook as she read it again, hoping she'd misunderstood. But the words remained brutally clear. 60 days. Then everything, her home, her studio. The restoration projects she'd spent months on would be rubble. Did you see? Signora Rossini, her elderly neighbor, appeared in the doorway clutching her own notice. Her eyes were red from crying. They're taking everything. My husband and I have lived here 43 years. Where will we go? Isabella's shock transformed into anger. The Palazzo Carafa wasn't just a building. It was history. A perfectly preserved example of 18th century Neapolitan architecture. The frescoes in the entrance hall alone were priceless. And it was home to 20 families, most of them elderly, all of them without the means to fight expensive lawyers. We'll fight this, Isabella said, her voice steadier than she felt. There has to be something we can do. Historic buildings have protections. We'll go to the Preservation Society, the City Council. The City Council? Signora Rossini laughed bitterly. Child, you don't understand how things work in Naples. Esposito development is connected. This was decided long before any notices were posted. But Isabella had spent her entire life preserving beautiful things that others wanted to destroy. She wasn't about to stop now. The community meeting was held in the basement of Santa Maria della Sanità Church, just a 10-minute walk from the palazzo. Isabella arrived early, her arms full of documentation, historical surveys, photographs, architectural assessments she'd compiled with manic intensity over the past week. The basement was already filling with residents, their faces etched with worry and resignation. When Vittorio Esposito walked in, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits, Isabella felt a chill of recognition. She'd seen men like this before. Short, stocky, with a thick beard and eyes that assessed everything in terms of profit. He wore a tan suit with too much gold jewelry, his presence filling the small space with casual menace. Let's keep this brief, Vittorio began without preamble, not bothering to sit. The building is structurally unsound. Demolition is scheduled for December 1st. You'll receive relocation compensation as required by law. That's all there is to discuss. That's a lie. Isabella stood up before she could stop herself, her file folders clutched to her chest. I've had the building assessed. The structure is sound. This is about profit, not safety. Vittorio's eyes fixed on her with the flat interest of a snake observing prey. And you are? Isabella Ferretti. I'm a restoration specialist, and I have documentation proving that Palazzo Carafa meets all historic preservation standards. You can't legally demolish it without— I can do whatever I own, Vittorio interrupted. The sale was legal. The demolition permits are approved. You're wasting everyone's time, Signorina. Then you got those permits illegally, Isabella shot back, her voice rising. Because that building is protected under Municipal Code 47, Section 12. I checked. You'd know that if you actually cared about following the law instead of bribing officials. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Vittorio's lawyers exchanged glances. Several residents gasped. Isabella realized she'd just publicly accused a connected man of corruption. But the words were out now, and she discovered she didn't regret them. Vittorio walked slowly toward her, his smile never reaching his eyes. You're very passionate, Signorina, but passion doesn't pay legal fees. How much do you think your little research project will cost you in court? 50,000 euros? 100? More? He paused directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. Sometimes it's wiser to accept reality. Life is easier that way. And sometimes reality needs to change, Isabella said, refusing to back down despite her pounding heart. I'm filing for historic landmark status. I'm contacting the Regional Preservation Office. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you're doing. For a moment, she thought Vittorio might actually strike her. His face flushed dark red, and his hand twitched at his side. But then he simply laughed, the sound without humor. File whatever you want. You'll lose. He turned to address the room. Meeting adjourned. You have until December 1st. He left with his lawyers, and the room erupted in whispered conversations. Some residents looked at Isabella with admiration, others with fear for what her defiance might bring down on all of them. Signora Rossini gripped her arm. That was very brave, dear, or very foolish. With men like Esposito, it's hard to tell the difference. Isabella spent that night at her work table, drafting formal appeals and preservation applications by lamplight, her coffee growing cold as the hours stretched toward dawn. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the footsteps on the stairs until they stopped directly outside her door. The knock was soft, almost courteous. Isabella glanced at the clock, 2:47 a.m. Her heart began to race. No one knocked on doors at this hour with good intentions. She approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. A man stood in the dim hallway, but not one of Esposito's thugs. This man was older, with gray hair and a well-cut suit. He looked more like a businessman than a threat, but in Naples, those were often the same thing. "Signorina Ferretti?" The man's voice was cultured, polite. "My name is Marco Santini. I apologize for the late hour, but my employer would like to speak with you. It's about your situation with the palazzo." Marco Santini. She knew that name. He was Dante Moretti's right hand, his consigliere, which meant Dante Moretti knew who she was, where she lived, and apparently about her confrontation with Vittorio Esposito. Isabella opened the door a crack, keeping the chain latched. "It's almost 3 a.m. "I'm aware." Marco's expression was patient, almost fatherly. "Signor Moretti understands you're fighting to save this building. He may be able to help, but these matters require discretion, and discretion requires unusual hours." Every instinct Isabella possessed screamed at her to refuse, to shut the door and pretend this wasn't happening. Accepting help from a man like Dante Moretti would come with strings attached, strings that could strangle her. But she thought of Signora Rossini, of the 20 families about to lose their homes, of the priceless frescoes that would be destroyed by wrecking balls. She thought of the look in Dante's eyes when she'd touched his hand, that flash of unexpected vulnerability. "Where?" she asked. "Trattoria da Nonna Rosa. It's closed for the evening, but the owner is accommodating." 20 minutes later, Isabella found herself walking through the rain-slicked streets toward the port. Marco Santini, a silent presence beside her. The trattoria was tucked into a narrow street, its exterior unremarkable except for the vintage photographs of Naples covering the walls. Through the window, she could see a single table occupied in the otherwise empty restaurant. Dante Moretti sat with his back to the wall, a position that let him see both the entrance and the kitchen. He'd removed his suit jacket, and his white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, making him look almost human. Almost. A bottle of red wine sat on the table, 2 glasses already poured. When Isabella entered, he stood, an old-fashioned courtesy she hadn't expected. Up close, without the crowd of the gallery between them, he was even more striking, and more unsettling. His dark eyes tracked her movements with predatory precision as Marco pulled out her chair. "Thank you for coming, Signorina Ferretti," Dante said, as Marco retreated to a discreet distance. His voice was smoother than she remembered, with that same rough edge that suggested he didn't use it often for pleasantries. "I imagine you have questions." "Several," Isabella said, refusing to be intimidated despite her racing heart. "Starting with why the head of the Camorra cares about a building in Quartieri Spagnoli." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Direct. I appreciate that." He gestured to the wine. "Do you drink?" "When strange men summon me to secret meetings at 3 a.m? Absolutely." This time he did smile, a real one that transformed his entire face, making him look years younger. "Fair enough." He pushed the glass toward her. "To answer your question, I don't care about the building. I care about Vittorio Esposito thinking he can operate in my city without consequences." "Your city?" "Naples has certain understandings. Territories, if you will. Esposito is encroaching. The Palazzo Carafa situation is just his latest overreach." Isabella took a sip of wine. It was excellent, probably worth more than her monthly rent. "So this isn't about helping me. It's about a power struggle. Does the motivation matter if the result is the same?" Dante leaned back, studying her. You'll get to keep your building. Esposito will learn to respect boundaries. Everyone wins. Except I'd be in debt to you. Isabella met his gaze steadily. I'm not naive, Signor Moretti. I know how this works. You do me a favor. Eventually you'll want one in return. Smart, he murmured, something like approval in his voice. But wrong. I don't want anything from you, Signorina Ferretti. Then why am I here? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning neither wanted to acknowledge. Dante's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Isabella thought he might evade. But then he did something unexpected. He placed his hand on the table between them, palm up, in a gesture that was almost vulnerable. 3 days ago, you touched my hand, he said quietly. Do you remember? As if she could forget. I apologized. It was an accident. I know. His eyes remained fixed on hers. No one has touched me, really touched me, in over 7 years. Not without fear or calculation or obligation. You did it without thinking, without wanting anything. And for just a moment, I felt... He trailed off, but Isabella understood. She'd felt it too, that strange connection. That shock of recognition as if her hand had found something it had been searching for without knowing. I don't know what you want me to say, she whispered. I don't want you to say anything. Dante's hand remained on the table, an invitation. I want you to let me help with the palazzo. No strings, no debt. Just let me do this one thing that has nothing to do with business or territory or power. Let me do something good. There was a longing in his voice that broke Isabella's heart. This was a man who'd spent so long being feared that he'd forgotten how to be human, who had everything and nothing, surrounded by people but profoundly alone. She shouldn't trust him. She shouldn't even be here. But her hand moved before her mind could stop it, reaching across the table to rest gently on top of his. The effect was immediate. Dante's breath caught, and his fingers trembled. Actually, trembled. Before carefully, reverently curling around hers. His eyes closed for just a moment, and the expression on his face was one of such profound relief that Isabella felt tears prick her own eyes. Okay, she said softly. Help me save the palazzo. When his eyes opened again, they held a warmth she hadn't thought possible in a man like him. Thank you, he said, and she understood he wasn't thanking her for accepting his help. He was thanking her for this touch, this moment of connection, this proof that underneath everything, he was still human. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across a table in an empty restaurant, the rain drumming against the windows. Two people from completely different worlds discovering they weren't as different as they'd thought. Finally, Dante spoke again, his voice businesslike, though he didn't release her hand. Esposito's permits were obtained through bribery. I can prove it. But more importantly, I can ensure the city council votes to grant landmark status to the palazzo. The vote happens in 2 weeks. How? Some council members owe me favors. Others fear me. And a few, believe it or not, actually respect historical preservation. A wry smile. Naples wouldn't be Naples without its history. And Esposito? Dante's expression hardened. Leave Esposito to me. He won't bother you again. Isabella knew she shouldn't ask her next question, but she had to. What will you do to him? Nothing violent, if that's what worries you. Dante's thumb traced a slow circle on her palm, the gesture absent and oddly tender. I'll simply make him understand that continuing this project would be unprofitable. There are many ways to hurt a man without ever touching him. It should have scared her, that casual acknowledgement of his power. Instead, what scared Isabella was how safe she felt, knowing that power was being used to protect her. I should go, she said, though she didn't move. It's late. Marco will drive you home. That's not necessary. Isabella. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her. It's 4 a.m, and you're a woman walking alone through streets I control. Please. Let me ensure you're safe." She nodded, slowly withdrawing her hand. Immediately, she missed the warmth of his touch, and from the flicker in his eyes, he felt the same loss. As she stood to leave, Dante caught her wrist gently. "One more thing. The gallery auction. The fresco you were bidding on. I purchased it. It's yours now for restoration. Consider it payment for—" He hesitated, searching for words. "For reminding me I'm more than what I do." Isabella's eyes widened. "I can't accept that. It's worth—" "I know what it's worth." His grip on her wrist tightened fractionally. "Take it. Restore it. Make something beautiful. That's payment enough." She wanted to argue, but the expression on his face stopped her. This mattered to him in ways she couldn't fully understand. "Thank you," she finally said. He released her wrist, his fingers trailing across her skin in a caress that was probably unconscious. "Marco will have it delivered tomorrow, along with full documentation for your files." The drive back to the palazzo was silent, Isabella lost in thought while Marco navigated the empty streets with professional efficiency. When they arrived, he spoke for the first time since leaving the restaurant. "He's not a good man, Signorina Ferretti. I want you to understand that. The boss has done things." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Things that can't be undone or forgiven. Don't romanticize what he is." "I'm not," Isabella said quietly. "But I'm also not going to ignore what I saw tonight. There's more to him than the reputation." Marco's expression softened. "Perhaps. But reputations exist for a reason. Be careful. For his sake as much as yours. The boss hasn't let anyone close in a very long time. If he's opening that door now—" He shook his head. "It could destroy him. Or you. Or both." Isabella climbed out of the car, Marco's warning echoing in her mind as she watched the taillights disappear into the night. She should be terrified. Instead, all she could think about was the way Dante's hand had trembled when she'd touched him, the longing in his eyes, the possibility that perhaps even the most broken things could be restored if someone cared enough to try. The fresco arrived the next morning, exactly as promised. 2 of Marco's men carried it carefully up the 3 flights of stairs, their presence causing quite a stir among the palazzo's residents. Isabella signed for it in a daze, staring at the damaged panel with its faded blues and golds, seeing not just a restoration project, but a message. Dante Moretti was giving her a piece of history to save because he couldn't figure out how to save himself. Over the following days, Isabella threw herself into dual projects, fighting for the palazzo's landmark status and beginning the delicate restoration of the fresco. The panel depicted St. Francis preaching to birds, the saint's face worn almost to nothing, the bird's wings barely visible beneath centuries of grime and neglect. She worked late into the nights, her fingers stained with chemicals, her back aching from hunching over the work table. But slowly, carefully, the image began to emerge, not as it had been, but as something new. Restoration and original art blending into something more beautiful for having been broken and pieced back together, much like what was happening with her feelings for Dante Moretti, though she tried not to think about that too closely. He didn't contact her directly, but his influence was everywhere. The city council suddenly scheduled an emergency hearing on the palazzo's preservation status. Documents proving Esposito's bribery mysteriously appeared in her mailbox. A lawyer, expensive, competent, and claiming to work pro bono, showed up at her door offering to represent the residents. "Who sent you?" Isabella had asked. The lawyer's smile was knowing. "Let's just say I owe a favor to someone who believes in architectural preservation." The night before the council vote, Isabella stood in front of her restored fresco, studying the saint's face. She'd managed to recover most of the features, and what struck her now was the expression. Not pious or distant, but profoundly human, full of compassion and understanding. A knock on her door interrupted her contemplation. This time she wasn't surprised to find Marco Santini in the hallway, though his expression was more troubled than before. "The boss would like to see you," he said without preamble. Tonight. It's important. The vote is tomorrow. I should prepare. The vote will go in your favor, I guarantee it. Marco's tone was serious. But there's something you need to know before it happens. Something about the cost. Isabella's stomach dropped. What cost? Not the cost to you. To him. Marco gestured toward the stairs. Please, come. This time they drove to Posillipo, climbing the winding roads until Naples spread below them like a carpet of lights. The Villa Moretti was everything the rumors claimed. Elegant, expensive, and utterly impersonal. Marco led her through marble halls hung with contemporary art, past security guards who nodded respectfully, into a study overlooking the bay. Dante stood at the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He'd shed his jacket again, and his white shirt seemed to glow in the lamplight. He didn't turn when she entered. Thank you for coming, he said to the window. I needed to see you before tomorrow. Isabella glanced at Marco, but the older man had already withdrawn, closing the door softly behind him. Marco said there was a cost. What did he mean? Esposito has agreed to abandon the Palazzo project, Dante said. The council will vote for landmark status. Your building is safe. That's wonderful, but… In exchange, Dante continued, his voice flat, I had to give Esposito control of 3 warehouses at the port. Warehouses I've held for 15 years. It makes him stronger, gives him legitimate standing in my territory. Some of my associates are unhappy with this decision. Isabella's breath caught. You gave up your own assets? For the palazzo? For you. Finally he turned, and the look in his eyes made her heart ache. I gave them up for you. And tomorrow, when the vote happens, everyone will know that Dante Moretti traded away power for a woman. For a building. For something that has nothing to do with business. Then why did you do it? He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just inches from her, close enough that she could see the stubble on his jaw, the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the faint scar through his eyebrow. Because for 20 years, every decision I've made has been about power. About maintaining control, building the organization, being feared. And I'm tired, Isabella. I'm so tired of being that man. His hand rose, hovering near her face, but not quite touching, as if he was afraid she might disappear. When you touched my hand in the gallery, I felt something I haven't felt since I was 17 years old. Hope. The possibility that maybe I could be more than this. He gestured around the study, encompassing not just the room but everything. His life, his choices, his sins. You make me want to be better. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. I'm just a girl who restores old paintings. I'm not special enough to… You're everything, he interrupted fiercely. You're everything I'm not. You take broken things and make them beautiful again. You fight for what's right even when it's dangerous. You touched me without fear, looked at me like I was human, not a monster. His voice cracked. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. She couldn't help herself. Isabella reached up and cupped his face with both hands, feeling the slight rasp of stubble, the warmth of his skin, the way he leaned into her touch like a man dying of thirst, finally finding water. You're not a monster, she whispered. Maybe you've done monstrous things, but that's not all you are. I see you, Dante. The real you. He made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then his forehead dropped to rest against hers, his hands coming up to cradle her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she'd heard about him. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to be close to someone without destroying them. Everyone I've ever loved, I've hurt. My wife. Tell me, Isabella said softly. He pulled back slightly, his hands sliding down to grip her shoulders. Arranged marriage. She was from another family, meant to solidify an alliance. I tried to care for her, but I didn't love her. Couldn't. She knew it. She gave me Sophia, and then she took pills. His voice was hollow. She left a note. Said she couldn't live as an object anymore, as something to be used and traded. Said she was sorry Sophia would grow up with a father who didn't know how to love. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? Dante's laugh was bitter. I made her a prisoner in my world, just like I'm making you one now, pulling you into this. After tomorrow, everyone will know you're connected to me. Esposito will know. My rivals will know. You'll never be safe again. Isabella stepped closer, eliminating the space between them, her hands sliding up to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart racing. Then don't make me a prisoner. Make me a choice. Let this be my decision, not something that happens to me. Isabella, I know what you are, she interrupted. I'm not naive, but I also know that right now, in this moment, you're just a man who's tired of being alone. And I'm a woman who sees the possibility of something real underneath all the violence and power. Maybe that's enough. It won't be easy. There are people who will try to hurt you to get to me. The life I lead is yours to change. She rose on her toes, bringing her face level with his. You said I restore broken things. So let me try. Let me see if there's something worth saving underneath all the damage. For a moment, Dante just stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face as if trying to memorize every detail. Then, with a reverence that made her breath catch, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was nothing like Isabella had imagined. It wasn't passionate or demanding. Instead, it was achingly gentle, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid she might shatter. His lips moved against hers with a sweetness that brought tears to her eyes, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other spread across her lower back, holding her carefully. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante pressed his forehead to hers again. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Maybe not. Isabella agreed, her hands fisting in his shirt. But you're going to try to earn me anyway, starting with being honest. No more secrets. If I'm choosing this life, I need to know all of it. He nodded slowly. Everything. I'll tell you everything. He paused. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want to hold you and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. They moved to the leather sofa, and Dante pulled Isabella against his chest, wrapping his arms around her as if she might disappear. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, feel the rise and fall of his breathing. Outside, the bay sparkled with reflected lights, and the city sprawled below them, beautiful and dangerous and alive. Tell me about Sophia, Isabella said after a while. Your daughter. She felt him tense, then slowly relax. She's 8, smart. Too smart sometimes. She loves to draw, mostly animals. She has my eyes, but her mother's smile. I don't see her enough. I keep her separate from the business. She lives with a nanny in a different part of the city. It's safer that way. Safer or easier for you? His arms tightened around her. Both. I don't know how to be a father. Every time I look at her, I see my failures. But I'm trying. God, I'm trying. Let me meet her, Isabella said impulsively. Dante's breath caught. Isabella, if this is going to be real, I want to know all of you, including the part that's a father. Let me meet her. He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then, Sunday, I'll arrange it. But if at any point this becomes too much, if you want out, I'll tell you, she promised. No disappearing, no running. We'll talk. Like adults. Like adults, he repeated, and she heard the wonder in his voice, as if the concept of a healthy relationship was foreign to him, which she supposed it probably was. They stayed like that until the sky began to lighten, neither wanting to move, both knowing that once they left this room, reality would intrude. But for now, in this moment, they were just two people finding solace in each other, two broken pieces discovering they might fit together after all. The council vote the next day was unanimous. Palazzo Carafa was granted landmark status, and Esposito Development's permits were permanently revoked pending a corruption investigation. Isabella stood in the council chambers, surrounded by her neighbors, including Signora Rossini, who wept with relief. and felt a sense of victory that was bittersweet. She'd saved the building, but she knew the real cost. Dante didn't attend. He couldn't, not without making their connection even more obvious. But Marco was there, standing in the back, and when Isabella caught his eye, he nodded once in acknowledgement. The celebration that evening at the palazzo was joyous. The courtyard filled with residents sharing wine and food, music echoing off the ancient walls. Isabella smiled and accepted congratulations, but her mind was elsewhere, counting the hours until Sunday. Until Sofia. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a park near the villa where Sofia and her nanny spent Sunday afternoons. Isabella arrived early, nervous in a way she hadn't been even facing down Esposito. This mattered. This was Dante's daughter, the most important person in his life. She spotted them easily, Dante cutting a striking figure in casual clothes, dark jeans, a gray sweater that made him look almost normal, and beside him, a dark-haired girl in a pink dress, clutching a sketchbook. Sofia looked up as Isabella approached, and she had Dante's eyes, dark and observant, and almost unnerving in a child so young. The little girl studied Isabella with the same intensity her father had, then turned to Dante. "Is this her?" Sofia asked. "The lady from the painting?" Dante crouched down to Sofia's level, his expression softer than Isabella had ever seen it. "Yes, Piccola. This is Isabella. She restores art, just like I told you. She makes beautiful things new again." Sofia considered this, then held out her sketchbook. "I draw. Papa says you might like to see." Isabella's heart melted. She sat on the bench and accepted the sketchbook, slowly turning pages filled with surprisingly sophisticated drawings of animals, birds mostly, rendered with careful detail. "These are wonderful, Sofia. You're very talented." "Papa says talent isn't enough. You have to practice." Sofia climbed onto the bench beside her, apparently deciding Isabella was acceptable. "He says you're important. That's why he talks about you at night when he thinks I'm sleeping." Dante, still standing, looked momentarily horrified. "Sofia." "It's okay," Isabella said, fighting back a smile. "I think about him too. Quite a lot, actually." Sofia nodded sagely as if this made perfect sense. "Are you going to marry him?" "Sofia." Dante's voice was strangled. But Isabella just laughed, the tension breaking. "I don't know yet. We're still figuring things out. Is that okay with you?" The little girl shrugged. "I guess. The last lady Papa liked wasn't nice. She only pretended to like me, but you're different. I can tell." "How can you tell?" Sofia pointed at the sketchbook. "You actually looked at my drawings. You didn't just say they were pretty. You studied them. That means you really care." Smart. Dante hadn't been exaggerating. This child saw everything. They spent the afternoon together, the three of them, and Isabella watched Dante transform. With his daughter, he was gentle, patient, genuinely present in a way he clearly wasn't in the rest of his life. He pushed Sofia on the swings, helped her climb trees, listened intently as she explained the anatomical accuracy of her bird drawings. And he looked at Isabella over Sofia's head with such profound gratitude that she had to look away, overwhelmed. As the sun began to set, Sofia's nanny appeared to take her home. The little girl hugged her father tightly, then, unexpectedly, hugged Isabella too. "You can come again," Sofia whispered in her ear. "Papa smiles when he talks about you. He doesn't smile very much." After Sofia left, Dante and Isabella walked through the park in comfortable silence, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. "Thank you," he said finally, "for being patient with her, for not being scared off by an 8-year-old interrogator. She's wonderful. You're raising an incredible person. I'm trying not to ruin her." His grip on her hand tightened. "Everything I touch, I destroy. But with Sofia, I'm determined to do better. She deserves better than what I had, than what I am." Isabella stopped walking, pulling him to face her. "You need to stop talking about yourself like you're irredeemable." "Yes, You've done bad things, but you're also a father who clearly loves his daughter. A man who gave up power to save a building because it mattered to someone else. Someone who kisses like he's afraid to break me because he values me that much. That's not a monster, Dante. That's a man trying to be better. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You just have to choose it. Every day. Choose to be the man you want to be, not the man everyone expects. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his face buried in her hair. What if I fail? What if I slip, go back to old habits? Then we'll deal with it, together. She pulled back to look at him. I'm not promising this will be easy, but I'm promising I won't run at the first sign of trouble. I'm in this, Dante. If you are. I am, he said fiercely. God help me, I'm in this. All of it. Whatever it takes. He kissed her then, there in the park as the sun set over Naples, and this kiss was different. Deeper, more passionate, full of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isabella saw the man he could be reflected in his eyes. Not a mob boss, not a monster, just a man, trying to find his way back to humanity through the touch of a woman who'd accidentally grabbed his hand and refused to let go. The next few months unfolded like a dream. Isabella finished restoring the fresco. St. Francis emerged from centuries of grime, his face compassionate and human, his hands outstretched toward the birds in eternal blessing. When she hung it in the palazzo's entrance hall, the entire neighborhood came to see it, and even Signora Rossini cried at the beauty. You brought him back to life, the old woman said, gripping Isabella's hand. Made him new again. Isabella thought about Dante and smiled. That's what I do. I restore things that are broken. Her relationship with Dante grew slowly, carefully, built on stolen moments and honest conversations. He told her about his father's death, about the violence that had marked his ascension, about the choices he'd made that still haunted him. She didn't judge or absolve. She simply listened, held his hand, reminded him that his past didn't have to dictate his future. In return, she shared her own fears, her terror of being inadequate, her grief over her parents' death when she was young, her desperate need to make beautiful things because the world had too much ugliness. They fit together in ways neither had expected. He taught her to see strength in vulnerability. She taught him to see beauty in imperfection. Sophia became a regular part of their Sundays, the three of them exploring Naples together, the underground tunnels, the archaeological museum, the pizzerias that had been serving the same recipes for centuries. The little girl blossomed with two adults focused entirely on her happiness, and watching Dante with his daughter, Isabella saw the future they could have. But reality had a way of intruding. It came in the form of Vittorio Esposito, who hadn't forgotten his humiliation. One evening, as Isabella worked late in her studio, the power suddenly cut out. She barely had time to register the darkness before the door burst open and rough hands grabbed her. She fought, screaming, but there were three of them, and they were strong. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, chemical-smelling, and the world went gray. When she woke, she was in a warehouse somewhere by the port. She could hear the sea, smell the salt and diesel. Her head throbbed, and her wrists were zip-tied to a chair. Vittorio Esposito sat across from her, smiling that cold smile she remembered from the community meeting. "Signorina Ferretti," he said pleasantly, "I'm glad you're awake. We have much to discuss." "Dante will kill you for this," Isabella said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Perhaps. But first he'll have to choose. You or his empire." Vittorio leaned forward. "You see, I've prepared a little gift for your boyfriend. In 2 hours, there will be a shipment arriving at Pier 7. Weapons, very illegal, very traceable. Anonymous tip to the police, and Moretti's entire operation comes crashing down. He goes to prison for 20 years, maybe more. Unless he's willing to trade his organization for your life. He walks away, leaves Naples, and I'll let you go unharmed. He refuses." Vittorio shrugged. Well, let's just say pretty girls who interfere in business sometimes disappear. Tragic accidents. Isabella's mind raced. He'll never agree. Dante won't abandon everything he's built. Then I guess we'll find out how much he really loves you. Vittorio stood. 2 hours, Signorina. Let's hope he makes the right choice. He left, posting guards at the door, and Isabella was alone with her thoughts and her terror. She knew Dante, knew his sense of duty to his organization, his loyalty to the men who depended on him, his pride in what he'd built. Could he really walk away from all of that? Should he? For one woman? She didn't want to be the reason his life imploded, didn't want to be the weakness that destroyed him. But as the minutes ticked by in that cold warehouse, Isabella realized something crucial. This was exactly what Dante had been afraid of all along. That loving her would make him vulnerable, would give his enemies leverage. And he'd been right. The question was, what would he choose? Dante Moretti stood in his study, Marco's words echoing in his ears, and felt something inside him shatter and reform simultaneously. They have Isabella, Marco repeated, his expression grave. Esposito's men took her 2 hours ago. He's demanding you walk away, from everything, or he kills her. Around the room, his closest associates shifted uncomfortably. These were men who'd served him for years, who depended on his leadership, whose families were fed by the organization he'd built. Boss? One of them said carefully. If you walk away, everything falls apart. Esposito takes over. Years of work? Gone. People depend on us, another added. Not just our guys, but the legitimate businesses we've invested in, the charities we fund, the balance of power in Naples. I know, Dante interrupted, his voice hollow. He thought of Isabella in some warehouse, scared, possibly hurt, and felt rage burn through him like fire. I know what's at stake. Then you know you can't do it, Marco said quietly. You can't trade the organization for one woman. It's not rational. No, Dante agreed. It's not rational. He looked around the room at the men who'd stood beside him through wars and negotiations, victories and losses. But here's what I've learned in the month since I met Isabella Ferretti. Nothing about love is rational. It's not strategic. It doesn't care about territory or power or legacy. He walked to the window, looking out at the city he'd controlled for so long. I've spent 20 years being rational, building this empire, maintaining control, making the smart play. And you know what I have to show for it? A beautiful prison. Money I can't enjoy. Power that isolates me. A daughter who barely knows me because I'm always busy being the boss. Sir, someone began. Let me finish. Dante turned to face them, and something in his expression must have been formidable because they all fell silent. Isabella touched my hand at an auction, and for the first time in 2 decades, I felt human again. She looks at me and sees a man, not a position. She makes me want to be better, not just more powerful. That's exactly what makes her dangerous, Marco said, though his voice was gentle. She makes you weak. No, Dante's voice was firm. She makes me strong enough to walk away from things that are killing me. You're right that the organization will suffer if I leave. But you know what? It will survive. You'll survive. Someone else will step up. Maybe you, Marco, maybe Carlucci. But the point is, the organization is bigger than one man. He paused, his next words coming from somewhere deep and true. But love isn't. Love is specific, unique, irreplaceable. And I will not spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have saved her, but chose power instead. The room erupted in protests, but Dante raised his hand. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you my decision. Contact Esposito. Tell him I accept his terms. I'll dissolve my interests, leave Naples, and he gets everything he wanted. But if Isabella has one bruise on her, one hair harmed, I will spend whatever life I have left hunting him down. Boss, think about this. I have thought about it. Every day since I met her, I've thought about it. Dante grabbed his coat. The difference is, now I know what actually matters. And it's not money or territory or fear. It's being with someone who makes you feel alive. He started toward the door, then paused. Marco, you've been with me from the beginning. You've been more than my consigliere. You've been my friend. So I need you to understand. I'm not choosing her over loyalty or duty. I'm finally choosing to be the man I should have been all along. The man my daughter deserves as a father. The man Isabella sees when she looks at me. Marco's eyes were suspiciously bright. You're sure about this? More sure than I've been about anything in my life. Then go get her, boss. And don't look back. The warehouse was near Pier 7, exactly where Vittorio said it would be. Dante arrived alone, as instructed, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. Inside, Isabella was still tied to the chair, but she was alive, alert, and the fury in her eyes when she saw him made his heart swell. "Dante, no!" she shouted. "Don't do this! Don't throw everything away!" "Touching," Vittorio said, emerging from the shadows with 2 armed men flanking him. The great Dante Moretti, brought low by love. "I almost feel sorry for you." "The papers are signed," Dante said, ignoring the jibe. His eyes were only for Isabella. "All my holdings, dissolved or transferred. My people have been notified. Naples is yours, Esposito. Now let her go." "First, I want to watch you beg." Vittorio pulled a knife, moving toward Isabella. "I want the great Dante Moretti on his knees, begging for his woman's life." Without hesitation, Dante dropped to his knees. "Please, let her go. I'm giving you everything you asked for. There's no need for more violence." Isabella was crying now, shaking her head. "Dante, get up. Please, get up." "See? That's where you're wrong," Vittorio said, circling Isabella. "There's always need for violence. It's the only language men like us really understand. And I want everyone to know what happens when you cross me, when you make me look weak." He raised the knife, and Dante's world contracted to that single point, the blade catching the light, Isabella's terrified eyes, his own helplessness. Then the warehouse doors burst open, and chaos erupted. Marco hadn't let Dante come alone after all. His men swarmed in, taking down Esposito's guards with practiced efficiency. Someone tackled Vittorio, the knife skittering across the concrete. Gunfire echoed in the enclosed space, brief and decisive, and then it was over. Dante was already moving, reaching Isabella, cutting her bonds with trembling hands. She collapsed against him, and he held her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. "You came," she sobbed against his chest. "You were going to give up everything." "Not everything," he corrected, pulling back to look at her. "Just the things that don't matter. You're what matters, Isabella. You and Sophia and the possibility of being someone better. The rest is just things." Marco approached, holstering his weapon. "Esposito's men are down. He's alive, barely. What do you want to do with him?" Dante looked at the man who'd threatened Isabella and felt nothing. No rage, no need for revenge, just exhaustion. "Turn him over to the police, with evidence of everything, the bribery, the kidnapping, all of it. Let the law handle him." Marco's eyebrows rose. "You sure, boss?" "I'm sure." Dante stood, helping Isabella to her feet. "I'm done with that life, Marco. Really done. Not because Esposito forced me out, but because I choose something different. The men won't understand." "Then help them understand. Tell them their boss finally figured out what's actually important." He turned to Isabella, cupping her face gently. "Tell them I chose love." The aftermath was complicated. Legal proceedings, property transfers, statements to authorities. Dante cooperated fully, providing evidence that took down not just Esposito, but several corrupt officials. He didn't ask for immunity or special treatment. He simply told the truth, faced the consequences, and accepted that redemption had a price. Surprisingly, that price wasn't prison. His cooperation, combined with his voluntary withdrawal from criminal enterprise, earned him probation and community service. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, had looked at him over her glasses and said, Signor Moretti, you're getting a second chance few men in your position receive. Don't waste it. He didn't intend to. Dante moved into a smaller home in Posillipo, nothing like the mansion he'd left behind. Isabella's studio in the palazzo became their shared space, filled with her restoration projects and Sophia's drawings. He took a position consulting on port security, legitimate work, using his knowledge for legal purposes. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was a fraction of what he'd once made. But every morning he woke up next to Isabella, and every weekend Sophia ran into his arms with genuine joy. And that was worth more than any empire. One Sunday, nearly a year after that first auction, the three of them returned to the Galleria Umberto Varra. An art exhibition was being held, featuring Isabella's restoration work, including the Giotto fresco Dante had given her. They stood in front of St. Francis, Isabella's hand in his, Sophia between them studying the painting with serious 8-year-old concentration. "You fixed him," Sophia said finally. "He was broken, and you made him beautiful again." Isabella smiled, squeezing Dante's hand. "That's what restoration means, Piccola. Taking something damaged and giving it new life." Sophia looked up at her father with those dark, knowing eyes. "Like what Isabella did for Papa." Dante crouched down, pulling his daughter into a hug. "Exactly like that. Sometimes people need restoration too. We all get damaged by life. But if we're lucky, we find someone who sees past the damage to what we could be." "I'm glad she found you," Sophia whispered. "I'm glad she touched my hand," Dante replied, meeting Isabella's eyes over his daughter's head. They stayed until the gallery closed, surrounded by art and history and beauty. As they left, walking down the same corridor where Isabella had accidentally changed both their lives, Dante pulled her close. "Have I told you today that I love you?" he murmured against her hair. "Only 3 times. You're slacking." He laughed, the sound genuine and free. "I love you, Isabella Ferretti. Thank you for restoring me. I love you too, Dante Moretti. Thank you for letting me try." Behind them, the Galleria's lights dimmed, but their future stretched bright and uncertain and beautifully human. 2 broken pieces that had found each other in the chaos of Naples, 2 people learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love over power, connection over control, vulnerability over strength. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is letting someone touch your hand and actually feeling it.